Godzilla King of the Monsters had Godzilla and the other famous Toho monsters, but the movie also introduced brand new titans. And just like any good kaiju, these monsters caused a bunch of destruction and chaos as they woke up and set out to meet their new alpha. What the movie didn't show directly was how these enormous creatures affected the areas that they ventured through. Outside of the vast amount of human deaths and completely destroying cities, the Titans actually helped the planet in more ways than us humans ever could. And this was told during the credits of the film, where news stories detailed the effects of Titans roaming the Earth. But what if this was a real story? How would us humans react? And what would happen to the environments of Earth? That's the topic for today. Residents, this is Jacob, and let's get to it. Let's get to the obvious first thing at hand if these gigantic Titans were to suddenly emerge. What would the inevitable destruction created from these monsters cost to us humans? Money, and lots of it. Hurricane Katrina was a relatively recent catastrophe of nature, and the damage it created costed a whopping $125 billion. This horrible event brought forth many of the same sorts of damages that would probably occur during a Titan uprising. But this storm was just in the areas surrounding the Gulf of Mexico. We know that from the movie that at least 17 of these Titans appeared, all from different locations spread all over the globe. And we know that when Ghidorah gave his call that these Titans set forth on a path of destruction, meaning anything in their route would be trampled and destroyed. The amount of money this would cost the countries of the world would be incomprehensible, possibly reaching well into the trillions of dollars range. New safety rules and guidelines would need to be established in order to prevent unnecessary deaths due to the Titans. Commercial air flights, vacations on cruise ships, and all forms of public transportation would be changed in a way not seen since 9/11. The uprising of these epic beings would no doubt create seismic activity that could possibly cause volcanic eruptions throughout Earth's volcanoes. These eruptions, spewing enough ash and smoke to block out the sun, would create serious problems for aircraft. The ash cloud created by these volcanoes would be sucked through the plane's engines. Here, the particles would melt under the immense heat, until reaching cooler parts of the engine, where the particles would go on to solidify, forming a glassy coating within the engine which prevents proper airflow that will eventually lead to the engines failing or even breaking to pieces. The dangers would not just be in the skies though. The coasts would be under constant surveillance, and access to areas inland within a Titan's domain would be prohibited. New procedures would be put in place just in case a Titan showed up, and you could bet that new technologies would be developed to help the people of the world keep away from harm as much as possible. To summarize this simply, our everyday lives would never be the same again. And it wouldn't just be the economics and rules of the world that would take a hit. The cultures of our world would certainly be changed forever. First off, the culture war of the modern world would probably take a backseat to much more important things like giant f***ing monsters. When faced with a real threat, you could bet that many of the world's issues with groups of people against one another would suddenly plummet. No matter how mean some can be, when faced with a much more terrible and serious threat, humanity does come together even in real life. What would probably be the most affected by Titans emerging would be the many different religions of the world. It wouldn't matter which god you had when giant monsters started to come out. While there are stories and myths within the religions of old, modern-day religions tend to leave out the beasts that were described in these ancient times. Even with ancient texts being thrown out the window due to the reality of gigantic creatures roaming our planet, I would bet that churches, mosques, temples, and all sorts of spiritual places would be full of those who wanted to be around others who they felt comfortable with. This could lead to new religions based off of worshipping the Titans. There's no way of predicting how spiritually we would all react, but you know there would be those who would just give up on religion completely, but also those who would allow the Titans' arrival to justify some crazed religious viewpoints. During the end credit montage of King of the Monsters, there were news stories of how the areas which had Titans travel through them were suddenly bursting with life. Forests grew back in the areas that were destroyed due to excessive logging, coral reefs that were dead became vibrant and full of life, and there was even one story saying how Titan waste, aka poop, was being used to make a fertilizer like none before it. There's little doubt in my opinion that humans wouldn't find a way to make a ton of money from this, and that would surely cause troubles as countries fought over who has the right to these new routes of income. It wouldn't just be the world around us changing, but also the world inside our minds. Those of us unfortunate enough to be caught in the middle of a disaster, both natural or man-made, experience changes in the way that we think and act. Those at Mental Health America claim these are common negatives that arise after one goes through such an event. Disbelief and shock, fear and anxiety about the future, disorientation, difficulty making decisions or concentrating, nightmares and reoccurring thoughts about the event, irritability and anger, sadness and depression, feeling powerless, changes in eating patterns, loss of appetite or overeating, crying for no apparent reason, headaches, back pains and stomach problems, difficulty sleeping or falling asleep, increased use of alcohol and drugs. If a Titan attack was to happen, the levels of PTSD amongst the masses of the people around the world would skyrocket. Suicide rates would probably go up, and overall mental stability would become a pressing matter for humanity. Areas directly affected by the Titans would probably be riddled with looters and criminals, taking any advantage they could to be able to steal, hurt, and do all sorts of bad deeds. Streets would be full of riots demanding governments to do something, anything regarding how we are going to continue living in a world of monsters. And you sure as hell know the internet would be full of those shouting their opinions, beliefs, and arguments. Without getting too much into it, social media would forever be changed as well. On a personal note, I'm not quite sure if a real monster outbreak would hurt or help Dangerville. Would you still watch us if there was a Titan taking house-sized dumps in your yard? The lives of us humans would be totally different, but what about the rest of the planet? Earlier, we mentioned how the Titans were helping the forests and vegetation of the world, due to their atomic activity not killing life, but actually making it stronger. Let's quickly travel to Chernobyl. Over 30 years ago, an accident with the town's nuclear reactor left the entire area uninhabitable. Outside of the initial damage created by the incident, where trees died due to the massive influx of radiation, the area now has an abundance of life, with studies claiming the area's biodiversity has drastically increased in the years following the accident. Storks, wolves, beavers, deer, and eagles have been reported in the area, as well as much more wildlife. Get this, birds can be seen flying in and out of holes in the failed reactors of Chernobyl. In most cases, the bird quality of life in Chernobyl has actually vastly improved, with only a few cases of negatively affected species. In short, without humanity, the wildlife of Chernobyl is prospering and doing much better than it would have been if we were still living in that area. So it seems that wildlife of all sorts can thrive and prosper in a radiation-filled Titan world. But that leads us to one really important question. Could we coexist? Godzilla King of the Monsters focuses on could we humans coexist with Godzilla and the other Titans. So could we? What we have discussed so far is just the first layer of grief that we would have to go through in the event of a Titan takeover. That being said, humanity as a whole could more than likely live alongside these monsters, but not without some massive changes in our daily lives. Major cities with insane amounts of population crammed into a tiny area would no longer be a smart way to live. If there are monsters that could level an entire city in a couple of hours, killing thousands or even millions at a time, the logic of city life just isn't there, especially in the coastal cities. But it wouldn't just be the cities in danger. All of us would have to live our lives like high-risk war and natural disaster areas in our real world are doing right now. All the time, for everyone. There would be those of us who oppose the Titans, begging for our governments to stop the monsters at all costs. And there would be those who argue the Titans should be given the respect they deserve as the true rulers of Earth. Where would you stand on this matter, residents? If an all-out Titan attack was to occur, what would you do? If you want to see how we think Godzilla would have been like in our real world, make sure to go watch our Walking with Godzilla original animation. It follows the Big G-Man as he walks the lands over millions of years, and meets some familiar faces along the way. If you think we earned it, make sure to share this video with some of your friends, and subscribe to become a resident of Dangerville today. This has been Jacob, you guys are awesome, and peace out.